Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Justice Revolution. I am your host, James the Patriot. As you guys can see today, I've got some new co-hosts. I have with me my sister from another mister, Miss Alina Erickson. Say hello.
Hello.
And then I've got Sonar. We'll go with that one. Some of you guys know him as Sonar in the chat. Say hello, Mr. Sonar.
Hello. Good
So
to see everybody.
Yeah, good to see you. So we decided to, so as you guys noticed, a couple people are missing today. So Justice is not here. She's actually at a wedding. And Erica has a funeral that she's attending. So seems to be a lot of those recently, unfortunately. So anyway, with that, we're going to jump right into it. A lot of things I want to cover today. Sonar, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and mute you while you're driving, and then I'll unmute you. There we go. So a lot of things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about updates on some court cases that I'm litigating, updates on some interesting things going on in the grand scheme of things, the Supreme Court case that's been making a lot of waves. I talked about it a little bit on the last broadcast. And the reason why Sonar is here is I asked him quite literally an hour ago to join us because he put together a motion to dismiss that a lot of you can use in these petty traffic courts that's using the statutes as they're written. So it's going to be good stuff. So with that, let's talk about the Supreme Court case. Unless Alina, you want to talk about something else?
First. No, that's a great one. Let's jump into it.
We start to there? Okay. Let me open up my, whoops. Let me get to the right screen here. Okay, here we are. So let me go to this case. Let me go to this screen right here. So there is a case before the United States Supreme Court. It's been filed by this gentleman, Rayland. I can't remember how to pronounce that. I apologize if he's listening or if he sees this for butchering your first name. Brunson, as the petitioner versus Alma S. Adams et al. There's actually 388 defendants total. What this case is a very interesting case. And when I first heard of this, I started looking into it and thinking, well, there's no way that this is going to see the light of day. But there was recently a broadcast that was put on, and I can't for the life of remember, Nino, I believe. I know I'm butchering that, and I don't know if you guys know who I'm talking about here, but he had on with him, he had Loy Brunson. Alina, I believe you met him, right? Loy?
Yeah.
Okay. So he had Loy, who, from what I understand, is the older brother. And then he had Juan O'Savin. Some of you guys know who Juan O'Savin is. And then he also had someone else I'd not heard of, but he goes by the name of Ghost. Interesting names that we have here. So what I find is fascinating is Loy was giving an update on this. And apparently these brothers, they filed multiple cases. It wasn't just one case. It's multiple cases, and they were filing these in the hopes that one of them would make it to the Supreme Court. Well, lo and behold, this one did. What's fascinating about this case, as I come over here to the questions presented, is it says this case uncovers a serious national security breach that is unique and is of first impression. And due to the serious nature of this case, it involves a possible removal of a sitting president and vice president of the United States, along with members of Congress. Essentially, what this case is about is these gentlemen have filed this case accusing members of violating their oaths of office because they failed to investigate claims of fraud during the 2020 election. So if you guys remember going back to January 6th, we all know about what happened on January 6th. The Congress was in session. people entered the God, why am I drawing a blank here? Oh, the Capitol building.
Mhm.
People entered the Capitol building. Congress runs for their lives, right? When they reconvened later that night, they were supposed to take 10 days to review the evidence. And instead of doing that, they just voted to table it. So these gentlemen accused them of violating their oaths of office. Now, when you read the original complaint, it's clear to see why the district court dismissed the case and why the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals dismissed the case, or I should say they affirmed the dismissal. Both of those courts ruled that they didn't have standing to bring this claim, which a lot of people struggle with. That part of it is the standing part. So what's fascinating though is the new information that has come that I've heard is Loy was on with again, I apologize, Nino or something of that nature. I cannot remember. And he said that they had filed the case with the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and they were doing nothing with it. They heard nothing for 3 or 4 months. It was just sitting there. And so they thought they were dead in the water. And so Loy said he talked to his younger brother, who's the legal expert of them all. And he said, is there anything we can do to move this case along? And so they got to looking, and apparently the Supreme Court has a rule that if the petition for a writ of certiorari deals with matters of national security, then it can bypass the Court of Appeals, since they were getting nothing. They needed the Court of Appeals to rule to dismiss the case, so then they can appeal it again to the Supreme Court. The Court of Appeals hadn't done that. So they reach out to the Supreme Court, they file the case, the Supreme Court calls, the clerk of the court calls this guy and says, hey, we need you to make a couple of changes to this, and we want you to file this back with us ASAP. So they said, how soon can you get us this information? And he says, 2 weeks. And they said, can you make it a week? Which is very interesting. I don't know. What do you make of that, Alina, just off the bat?
I have my speculations.
Okay.
I have 2 words for you. Mike Lee.
Very well, yeah.
How hard did they try to get rid of Mike Lee, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I hadn't heard that one before. That's interesting.
Well, I have a friend who said it. Her and I were talking about this, and yeah, makes absolute sense.
That's a great angle.
That's actually what's very concerning about this, and I just always am cautious when approaching these kinds of things, because intentions mean everything.
Yeah.
Because you start removing people. What an easy way to get rid of Mike Lee if that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, it is interesting, for those of you who are watching this, who are not, well adversed with Utah political scene. The election that we recently had, the midterms, the 2022 election, Mike Lee was up for re-election. There was for lack of a better term, an idiot/moron, or both combined, was running against him as an independent. The Democrats didn't put anybody up. In fact, they gave their money to this guy, the independent. There was a lot of money pumped into this campaign, and the local media kept saying Mike Lee was in trouble. The national media kept saying he was in trouble. He wasn't even close to being in trouble.
Well, I think we have to go back further. So caucus night.
Yes. Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, caucus night, because Becky Edwards was also Republican, allegedly. We can say we're a lot of things, right? But do we really honestly align with the values of the party? And I would argue, no, she doesn't. And that's pretty well known because of her stance on abortion and other issues. So I think there was an orchestrated effort between weakening the vote with the Republicans. She had that purpose to do to begin with. And we had more people show up for caucus that night back in March. And so if you have people that you're planting in there to choose the delegates, I don't know. I mean, I was there at state convention. it was very obvious Mike won. The crowd was wild, happy to
Yeah.
see him.
Yeah.
I mean, standing ovation for several minutes, but needless to say, there were a lot of Becky Edwards supporters, and she ran a very hateful campaign against Mike Lee.
She did.
And so I think that was the first step. And then you had Evan McMullen to be an independent. Yeah, because, only one Republican can get on the general ballot. So, of course,
Yeah.
what a brilliant thing to do. Let's make you an independent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would like to call that a fence sitter, somebody who doesn't know how to stand on one side or the other. We're just going to just be independent, not claim anything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's that's an interesting take. And I hadn't actually thought of that. That thought not even crossed my mind, even though I probably should have, because I knew if memory serves, Mike Lee's name was on President Trump's list as one of the potential Supreme Court nominees, from what I understood. Am I wrong there? Do you remember?
I don't remember that, but
I think he was. I think he was.
Well,
anyway,
it's sad to me that even in my campaign, because I openly supported Mike Lee.
Yeah.
And it was for that reason. I mean, I don't just marry into a party or marry into a political person. I'm very methodical with who I support and why. But because of Becky Edwards' voting record, because of her background, because of the things she was saying, I was the only candidate in my race that openly supported him. But because I did, there were several people who attacked me who they didn't know anything about me. I don't think, unless asked, I named the word Trump once.
Yeah.
And it's not because I can't look at Trump and say he did a lot of really great things. And there's things I don't like. That's just the kind of person I am. But I was attacked because I was supporting Mike Lee for standing on principle. And there were a lot of people who hated that idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's ultimately what it's about, right? Excuse me, is standing on your principles. And we've all known, those of us here in Utah have known Mike Lee for quite a while, and he's always stood on his principles about everything. I mean, I can count on one hand how many individuals in Congress, both in the House and the Senate, that I have respect for, and he's actually one of them. Most of the other people don't even get me started on that. So,
well, let's be clear. Mike Lee's the only one that's really come forward to try and draw some attention on the Respect for Marriage Act.
Exactly. Yeah, he's brought it to the forefront and said, "Hey, this is a problem. This bill is a problem with the way it's written," and he introduced an amendment to it to shore it up, and they're trying to shoot that amendment down. I mean, we could spend the next 45 minutes talking about that, but I want to get back to the Supreme Court case. So that's an interesting angle with the Mike Lee and why the court came to the Brunson brothers and said, "Can you get us this petition within a week?" So they did that. They actually filed the case with the Supreme Court on. It was received by the Supreme Court on October 24th. It was docketed the 20th, the day that they submitted it. And what happens at that point is when the Supreme Court accepts the case. You guys have to understand this. This is a pretty big deal. The Supreme Court receives anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 cases a year. They accept in any given year 300 to 400 cases at the most. So just to be on the docket is a pretty big deal, which at first glance, I mean, I told you, Alina, what my thoughts were, and I've shared them in the past. But obviously, I'm an upfront individual, and if things change, if my opinion changes, I'm going to let people know. After listening to this interview with Lloyd Brunson, I was fascinated to hear that the Supreme Court was actually working with them to get this information sooner. So what happened was they docketed the case, and then they gave the defendants' attorneys till November 23rd. That's the day before Thanksgiving, to file a response to this petition. Well, what's interesting about that is the general counsel withdrew as counsel, and so I'm trying to remember. It's the Solicitor General's office for the United States is now named counsel for the defendants, and they're waiting for a response, to oppose this petition. The only thing that gets filed is a one-page document that says the defendants waive their rights to file a response to this. Who in their right mind would waive a response to a petition that could potentially have the defendants removed from office and barred from ever holding office again, and potentially even facing treason charges. Isn't that fascinating? Do you guys find that fascinating? Kevin, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts on that. I know you're driving, and I apologize, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
In the back of my mind is always the fact that there are so much, everything with Trump assumed as a sting operation until proven otherwise.
Yep.
How many people have already cut deals and turned essentially state's evidence? It would be shocking to me if all 388 had already done so, but it wouldn't surprise me if most of them had potentially already essentially turned state's evidence and are working and cooperating behind the scenes. I just assume everything is a show. Everything is proceeding. If Joe Biden himself is the perfect example. If you couldn't pick a better actor to show everybody how much of a sham and how much the media goes to cover for everybody than what Joe Biden's done. And I think, on a different level, a lot of people have already done that behind the scenes. But if the entire government is essentially corrupt, 60, 70%, how do you clean that up?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is you do it behind the scenes until it's all more or less cleaned up, and you let them continue in their position so you can continue to catch people and resolve things. Mm-hmm. And if a bunch of them were essentially already said, hey, I give up, I will do whatever I can to help, so that we don't just, so that everything, you have continuity of government until this all pans out. That's the first thing that pops into my mind as a plausible explanation, but it involves something that most people don't consider plausible.
And that makes perfect sense. And for those of you, and I apologize, I didn't give Sonar the introduction he deserves. How many years have you been in the military?
23.
23 years. Okay, so when you've been in the military 24 years, then you'll be an expert, and we can talk then. Yeah. So
perfect.
But no, I'm just teasing. So obviously, as an individual in the military, and you're remind me your rank again.
Right now, well, I'm in the process of retiring. I've been a colonel for the past 3 years, but I'll be retired as a lieutenant colonel here shortly.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
So we got Colonel Sonar, part of the military, who understands policies and procedures, and things are done according to the book. And I agree with that. Juan O'Savin gave the interesting theory, I guess we can call it. His theory was, he says, so the reason the Supreme Court took the case was we've got a lame duck session of Congress, right? So we just had the election. The Republicans are slated to retake the House in January. So his theory is that the Democrats, while they still have some time, are going to do anything they can to affect the makeup of the Supreme Court, put in term limits, add more justices to the court, to stack the court, whatever. So his theory is by the Supreme Court taking this case, they actually have a way to play. They have a way to play defense on against the other individuals that are coming after them. This case would be the Democrats. So I thought that was an interesting take. What are your thoughts on that, Alina?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. You never know. And I agree with Sonar. You never know what's going on behind the scenes. And I mean, again, it's like, is it from the angle that I initially proposed? Is it because there's something bigger? I mean, who knows? Yeah. It is really interesting. But I think we have to remember that in Utah, there's a few concerning things about this bill. Again, this goes back to my conversation with my friend. When we have people leave office in Utah, it's according to Utah code that our governor is the one who appoints the replacements in the event that there's not an election.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, Cox is not listed in this. So if he stays in and he gets to appoint anybody who would be dismissed from office if this is successful, that's a little startling.
It is very startling. Yeah. So for those of you, again, who are watching this that don't live in this state, I mean, most people think of Utah as like, oh, geez, isn't that place like as red as my blood? Um, on the surface, yes, but realistically, no. I mean, these guys are rhinos. We all have a loving name for our Governor Cox. I call him Governor Caillou. So those of you who know that kids show Caillou, you'll know what I'm talking about. And that little kid has the most annoying voice you'll ever hear. Cox is the same way. So he is not a governor of the people or by the people or for the people. He's a governor for profit. And that's the fact of the matter. And we can talk about, again, another topic for another day about the elections here in Utah. And we have, Alina and I have good friends that are up to their necks in that stuff. They know all about it. So we'll talk about that on another day. But that is concerning because, yes, in this lawsuit, Moore is listed, Blake Moore. I believe Curtis is listed. I'm trying to think if I don't believe Burgess Owens voted to certify. I don't remember. I didn't look to see if his name was there. And then what's our other representative? I can't think right now. Why am I drawing a blank?
Chris, come on.
Oh, Chris. Oh, it's going to kill me. I can.
This is so bad. My friend ran against him.
What the heck is his name? Chris Stewart.
Anyway, it'll come to you.
Chris Stewart. Yes, he's listed as well.
It's not. Well, Chris Stewart is actually my congressman.
Are you sure?
It's not Chris Stewart, but yeah, we'll find it. But
yeah. Well, anyway,
the other thing I think is really important to consider, and this is the last point I have, and I would like Sonar's opinion of this because they talked about military rule in this. So are we familiar with what could happen under martial law? Are we familiar with, do we want to be under military rule? Like, what's the long-term plan if this lawsuit is successful?
Are you talking about like the continuity of government things under the, what is it, 11.3? Is that what we're talking about?
As far as I know, this lawsuit listed the government as a means to come in and help with military rule. And I don't know much more than that, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, Sonar?
My thoughts on the continuity of government is, I think it's very plausible. And if it's being done, it's being done very, surreptitiously, maybe the wrong word, but very transparently. The goal, I think, would have to be, minimum casualties, minimum trauma. And if I were to do it, or, in the things that I have seen, you would basically, you never interrupt an enemy when they're in the process of destroying themselves.
Amen.
The fundamental problem is people have to see things for themselves. You can't force somebody, and in fact, it goes against everything we believe in terms of liberty, to try to force somebody to believe something that they don't believe. If people aren't ready to believe that, all this stuff has happened behind the scenes, that, they're not willing and able to conceive that all the blackmail, all of the child sex trafficking, all of these horrible things that have gone on, they're just gonna, cower and not believe. It's almost like it's a fail-safe for evil. It's so unbelievably evil that it wouldn't, the people will defend it because they're invested in that sort of. So you're talking continuity government. You want to make the transition smooth.
Yeah.
And I think it would be transparent as possible, so that all the old institutions would seem like they're still there, like in particular the media, which is in the process of destroying itself. Their credibility is shot. Everybody knows it's shot. And it's, they know we're lying. We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying, yet they're still lying, right? And we're at that phase. And that's good, because the fundamental, I go back to, the fundamentals of warfare. Most important strategic objective is for the people to see the deception. Otherwise, they just get tricked into the same thing again. They have to see it. And once they do, then we, the people, can solve everything. Just kind of like my affidavit. Once we have the power, once, you, James, have put all this out for other people to replicate, there's no stop.
Yeah.
But we have to deal with the trauma in a way. And the military, I think, would go about it the same way. Is continuity government will be minimum intrusiveness, let things continue, so that there's not this gaping power vacuum of all these senators and all these representatives that are suddenly gone.
Yeah.
that would be more traumatic than letting things continue and let them, slowly be replaced organically by the people's will.
Yeah.
As they wake up.
Yep. See, there's a plan. You're seeing it unfold right before your eyes. I mean, there were so many coincidences that had to happen for this case to land in the Supreme Court's docket at this point in time, right after the midterm election, where the House is going to be flipped back to the Republicans. There's just too many coincidences for this to happen. It just doesn't happen like that. So, Sonar, you're right, because what's the simplest way to affect a quote unquote revolution without the blood and guts of a bloody war? What's the simplest way to do that? Well, obviously we knew that. I mean, we've heard in the past, and again, I'm with Alina on this one. I don't believe any one man is the savior of our country. I don't. I believe that we the people are. However, if there's somebody who is coming from a position where they have a voice and they have the ears of millions of people, it is President Trump. He has a massive following. We know that. And so he has said time and again that this is a country that is founded upon the principles of liberty and freedom and the rule of law. And what do we do when we have individuals who are supposed to be quote unquote leading us? They're not leading us. They're lining their pockets. And we know that. So how do we affect this change without taking up arms? This is by far one of the simplest ways to do it. So I'm a cautious optimistic. I hope, I pray and hope that there's something that will come of this for the good of our country. I also take Alphonse's approach, where I also sit back and go, I really don't care what happens in Washington, D.C., because the minute you start poking your nose around my business, then you and I are going to have problems. Then I'm going to sue you in federal court. Then we're going to go that direction. Alphonse is right, and Sonar hit the nail on the head too. And this is why I do what I do. This is why Alina and I do what we do. We need to educate our brothers and sisters that if you want to ensure your liberties and your rights are guaranteed, you need to take a stand, because if you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. That's the end of it. So if you don't understand what your rights are and how to enforce them and how to get these people away from you, you've got nothing. So let me finish up real quick, because I'm gonna piggyback on what I just said there with why Sonar is here. But where the Supreme Court is on that, by the way, so the government has waived their right to object. So what's going to happen now is that the 9 Supreme Court justices are going to go into conference. They're going to review the case. They're going to review everything, and then they're going to vote on whether or not they should take the case and that they should hold hearings on it. All it takes is 4 justices. 4 justices to agree. We know that Clarence Thomas is going to be one of those. The other 3 are iffy, as far as I'm concerned. Clarence Thomas is the only constitutionalist that I know of based off of all of his rulings. There's hope, slight hope. Amy Coney Barrett and Gorsuch, not Gorsuch. What is that his name? No, what the heck is the guy that?
Alito.
Sam Alito, and then what was the guy? Why am I drawing a blank? What's the justice that was put in right after Trump got into office? Why can't I think of his name?
Kavanaugh.
Not Kavanaugh, the other guy, the one before him.
Wow.
Why? I'm an idiot. I'll look it up.
Yeah.
Anyway.
By the way, our nameless congressman is John Curtis.
Curtis!
We kept trying to say Chris. It was Curtis.
John Curtis. Okay. Man, that's good to know. So all it takes is 4 justices to say, yeah, we want to hear this case. We want to hear oral arguments on it. I'm telling you guys, if they do that, it's going to really rock the world. And to Sonar's point, how many of us have heard anything about this from the mainstream media? Zero. They haven't even bothered to bring it up. So let's move on to the next topic, and why I invited Sonar here, because he talked about where we need to stand up for our own rights. I want you guys to see this that he put out, and oh, sorry, it's got your name on there. I apologize.
It's on the Telegram site.
Yeah. I guess you do say Kevin Sonar Hall. So full disclosure. So I get a lot of questions from people asking about, freedom of travel, freedom of being able to. Okay, CC was right. It is Gorsuch. Okay, thank you. I thought I had it right. So, so we do get a lot of questions in the Telegram chat about, do I have to register my car? Do I have to do these things? When you read the laws as they're written, the statutes and codes as they're written, it's fascinating how these legislatures put little things in there that are very tricky, that a lot of people don't really catch it at first glance. And so, Kevin, I'll let you kind of give the background on what happened and then where you came up with this, because this is brilliant as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. You kind of laid the background. I've been looking at these sort of things for a long time and how to effectively, stand up for my rights in numerous ways. And one of the little ways was I'm done with the registration. It's not required. And so I stopped registering my car back in August or something, and just let it lapse. And fast forward 4 months later, and driving home, and late at night, and the cop pulls me over. So gives me the citation. I get to practice my interactions with the cops, which is, if you haven't done that, that's always something to at least think through, because it's easy to start talking and just give away all your rights right away. But just calmly, don't answer. You don't have to answer any of their questions, and
No.
you can answer their question with a question, which is what I did. Is he asked me if I knew my registration was expired, and I couldn't think of anything else at the time, so I said, that is a good question, and I just let it drop right there. And he was fairly young, and it was kind of interesting. He was cordial, and it was all fine, but he went back disappeared, and gives me this citation, which is at the end of the whole thing. But and so I go home and I start researching and start looking. I was going to contest it, and I was going to go down the jurisdiction paths and the constitutional paths, and I was praying about it. And, God, I had read through this before, and God just kind of said, hey, here's the easy way to go to, stand up for my rights. My objective right now is not to spend, weeks on, the rest of the constitutional stuff, but to just knock this out, to have this on the record that it's not required. And sure enough, the statute has this exception that is fairly clear cut.
Yeah.
But it's also written in a little bit of a tricky way. So maybe we should read that first. I don't have it pulled up. If you want to go ahead and read it there.
Yep, I've got it right here on the screen. So, this is really just brilliant too. So here in Utah, under our Utah code, this is the Motor Vehicle Code, title or section, Title 41. Under the definitions it says vehicles that are exempt from registration. Okay. It says any vehicle that is driven or moved upon a highway only for the purpose of crossing the highway from one property to another.
Now, it's tricky because it kind of sounds like, why did the chicken cross the road, right?
Exactly.
The jokes kind of write themselves, but it doesn't just mean like, hey, I can cross the highway and go to the other side of the road there, and that wouldn't even make sense in the day and age of 70-mile-an-hour interstates.
Nope.
Right. And
nope.
So it kind of is written in a way that, crossing, well, what does that mean? Well, you look up the definition, and crossing basically like, crossing the Atlantic Ocean, or I could cross the state, cross the entire Utah state. It doesn't say whether the properties have to be right next to each other or across each other or anywhere. It could be across the state or in another state entirely. And part of me thinks that this was written because some people actually know the Constitution, and they carve out the exceptions in a way that does not appear to the average person. At first I even did this. I kind of looked at it. I'm like, no, does that really? Yeah. And God's like, yeah, go for it. Right. And after I actually, James, your previous one for Mike, the trespass, the constitutional objection to all that really hit it home for me. You know, the statute would be vague and unconstitutional. Well, the prosecutor might argue that it's overbroad. I don't think it's overbroad. I think it's perfect. But it would definitely be vague if they tried to construe it in any more restrictive way.
Yeah. Well, what's fascinating about this is there is Supreme Court precedent where if the legislature, so what they do when they're analyzing a statute is they're trying to understand what was the legislative intent. What was the intent of the legislature by wording this statute this way? If they can't find anything within the definitions, for example, like the definition of crossing, right? We talked about that. So if there's nothing within the legislation under the definitions of crossing, well, then what the Supreme Court does is they say, well, now we're going to take it in the general context and the meaning of the word as would be used in the common form of the English language, which, would refer back to, the Merriam-Webster dictionary or whatever else. And so this is why this is brilliant is like you say, well, here's what the Merriam-Webster defines as crossing. And that can actually be, you can use that as evidence. It can be judicially noticed because it's just undisputed. Okay. So when you look at this, it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. So the way I read that is anyone can claim I'm just crossing the highway from one property to another. Doesn't matter that that property is my property to the property called Walmart or the property called the school or the property called something else, a golf course. In my case, that's where I spend most of my time, right? It doesn't matter. That's what the statute says. And so what I love about this, guys, is now the burden of proof shifts back to the moving party to prove that Kevin was not doing this right here. What evidence do they have?
Nothing.
What evidence are they going to bring to the table?
They don't even have a real plaintiff. They have a fictional plaintiff, right?
Yeah.
They don't even have somebody with standing. The officer doesn't even really have standing to be doing anything.
The officer doesn't have standing because how in the world was he harmed by you not registering your vehicle? Right? I mean, how is he going to come into court and prove that? Now, again, you guys need to know and understand, and I'm sure you all do, whenever you're issued a traffic citation, that's administrative, 100%. That has nothing to do with a constitutional court. You're being prosecuted as if you're an inhabitant or a member of the corporation, which brings me to my next thing. Okay. So I get a lot of people asking, well, okay, that's all fine and dandy for the registration thing, but what do I do about a speeding ticket? Or Alina, you had a situation with your son. I'm not going to go into detail, but you had a situation with your son that you were asking about. And so I would go back to, let me get to where I'm at. So what I would do if it's one of those other situations is I would challenge the definitions. A lot of you in the Telegram group have seen, we've posted, it's the Steve Emerson file for the tax court, where you're challenging the definition of a taxpayer. Taxpayer appears to be a person that is a member of the corporation, yada, yada, yada. Well, when you read the code, this is what's fascinating about that. So let me open up this one right here. Okay. This is the Utah code under our traffic code. These are the definitions. Okay. So when you look at the violations, it says a person this, a person that. We've talked about this before. All right. So what does the legislature say that a person is? Let me get down here to a person right here. Alina, can you see this?
If I got really close, you better read it. It's okay.
According to the Utah legislature, this is what a person is or means. Person means a natural person, firm, co-partnership, association, corporation, business trust, estate, trust, partnership, limited liability company, association, joint venture, governmental agency, public corporation, or any other legal or commercial entity. Okay. So based off of that, what do you two think was the legislative intent for these traffic laws? I'm curious to hear what your opinions are.
Well, it doesn't say basically a man or a woman.
No, it does
at
not.
At the very elementary level.
Okay. This is the one that gets me right here. Or any other legal or commercial entity. So what are your thoughts on that, Sonar?
We might have lost him.
Oh, we lost him. Dang it.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, commercial or legal entity, that's like a corporation.
Yeah.
Right? That's like a business.
Here's what's fascinating about the statutory construction. Oh, he's back. We lost you there for a second. I was curious to know what your thoughts were, Kevin, on that statute of person. There you go.
Sorry, the comm just went out and did its little. I think the Safari 1.14.3. I got to get my phone updated for it to not do that. So I missed what you guys said there for the last 2 minutes, but I'm guessing it has to do with the the natural person definition.
Yeah, it's the natural person, comma, association, comma, or any other legal or commercial entity. So
right, person's like a catch-all for everything, not just man. So anything that's defined towards a person is, in my view, they're looking commercially, in all these statutes to define things primarily for commercial, commerce-related interests, and they try to dragnet in the natural person into that, or any natural person that wants to submit themselves. I.e., you want to have these special privileges. You need to, you want to be selling wares on the side of the road. Well, you need to adhere to these things.
Yeah,
right.
It always fascinates me when I read the definition of person in the statutory language, because it says a person is a natural person. Well, wait a minute. Well, what is it? You just told me what it is. That's like, hey, Alina, can you tell me what salt tastes like?
Salty.
Well, okay. So you just told me what it is, but you didn't tell me what it tastes like. Right?
Well,
and you're like, well, it's not sweet, but it's not.
Well, it's then salty. What's sweet, James? You tell us what sweet is.
Excuse me. I know that's what cracks me up is when you look at these definitions, to the everyday man and woman, we read that and go, oh, okay, well, that's a natural person. That's me. And you don't even challenge it. So if I'm in a situation where I'm issued, like, let's say a minor traffic citation, I'm not talking an accident where there's injuries. That's a whole other story. You need to step up and take responsibility for your actions there. But let's just say you're driving down the road, minding your business, and you got Billy Bob Sheriff there, clocked you going 3 or 4 or 5 miles over the speed limit, and he's bored out of his mind, and so he pulls you over and gives you a ticket. All right? How are you going to go in and challenge that? Well, I would do along the same process that Kevin just did. I would file a motion to dismiss, and I would say, I need some clarification here, because according to the statute, this is the definition of a person, yet the moving party in this case, which is the city or whoever it is, has offered no evidence to prove that I am a person according to the statutory definition. So I'm going to go ahead and ask for them to bring that evidence forward. And if they can't, then this case must be dismissed. That's how you turn this crap back into their face. The only other thing I would suggest to anyone watching this, Kevin was talking about, how to handle when you get pulled over. It can be very stressful, but I would just tell you this. When the guy walks up to your window, you roll your window down. You can roll it all the way down or a quarter of the way. That's up to you. There's no law that requires you to do that. Cooperate with what they're saying. And if they ask you any questions, this would be my response. I would say, can anything I say be used against me? Of course, he's going to say yes. Great. Then I choose to remain silent on any question. So like in your case, Kevin, when he said, do you know your registration's expired? Sir, I choose to remain silent. Right? I choose to remain silent. You, sir, need to build your case against me, and I have a right not to self-incriminate myself, but people do it all the time. They do it all the time because we've been taught to be good citizens, good people, go along to get along. But from what we've talked about, and Kevin and I had this discussion before, is these cities, these municipalities, these counties, and even the state, to a matter, it's a grand extortion scheme. They're extorting money from people. Guys, if any of you have been to a traffic court and you see how many people they're rolling through there on a daily basis, they're 20, 30, 40 people. And they're all paying fines anywhere from $60 to $140 to $300. Do you guys have any idea how much money these corporations are bringing in? It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
I've got a pile on there if you want, James.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
I did the small court claims route for another parking ticket in Salt Lake City. I actually got the parking ticket on purpose because I wanted to see how the process worked. And it's just you got to start small somewhere.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of the things that I found that was just disgusting to me is the fact. So come to find out that small claims court, you have a right to trial by jury here in Utah.
Yes.
Most people don't realize that, you know, they will deprive you of your right to trial by jury in an infraction, in a criminal case.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that really hit home when I was going through all this. So the citation I got is essentially a criminal citation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they're saying that you don't have a right to a trial by jury. And I'm like, wait a second. I have a right to a trial by jury in a small claims civil case, but not in a criminal case? How screwed up is that? Right? And the way they do it in the small claims is kind of interesting. They basically transfer it to district court.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down that road. I actually wrote like a 10-page affidavit to transfer it to district court, motion to move and all that. And then, when I went to file it, they're like, oh yeah, you got to pay, the jury fee of $250 and the filing fee. It was gonna be like $500 to contest this $35 ticket. I'm like, okay, well, past some point, discretion is the better part of valor. Well, maybe do that some other time on principle, but not this time.
Yeah.
So they make you pay for your right to trial by jury in the civil case, but they don't even give that option in the criminal case for an infraction where they say because there's no possibility of jail time, of incarceration, that
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a right to trial by jury. And it just was fascinating to me, especially in contrast to the small claims court, which I only knew about because I went through that whole procedure. And it just, it boggles the mind. And the more I thought about the whole justice court, if you hadn't heard about it, anytime you appeal something out of the justice court, it goes to a trial de novo, like a brand new trial. They try everything over again. Nothing transfers. They don't transfer record. It's not a court of record. They have to keep an audio recording for a year, but it's not a court of record. So you basically get to try everything over again. It's almost like it was, in my mind, it's double jeopardy. The prosecution can ask for a trial de novo too, right? That's double jeopardy for sure. They're saying that it benefits you to be able to try everything over again. I'm like, well, now you get to go through the whole process again.
Mm-hmm.
I should post, there's the good thing that I'll post on the Telegram website, a 43-page about the injustice of the court system. But all that to say that, I went through the small court claims process. I went through just the sausage making factory. They had like 30 people on this phone call for 3 hours, and they didn't want to hear, my 7-page affidavit. He's like, oh God. And he skipped through it in like 3 minutes and basically dismissed the whole thing. I'm like, well, that's not much justice. He's not even he's basically, I forget what they call it. He's not a real judge.
Magistrate.
Not even a magistrate.
Not even a magistrate.
He's basically a moonlighting lawyer. Like literally that's what they do in the small claims courts.
Wow.
And right, you don't expect any of this until you go through the process, and it just opens your eyes. Like, it's fraud all the way down, just like the citation. Like, we didn't talk about this, and I put it in that motion as well. As they reference at the bottom, they try to intimidate you. They put, according to 77-7-22, it's a misdemeanor if you don't show up for this.
Failure to appear, right?
And Sonar's rules for breaking the rules are, know what the rules are, know why they're there, and know what the consequences are, right? I test pilot, we broke the rules or made the rules all the time. And so you kind of want to know, half the time there's an exception to the rule that lets you do it. Half the time there's a reason, somebody died for the rule. You kind of want to know about that, it's important. And what are the consequences? And so I dug into it in 77-7-22 was repealed back in 2018 by SB 58. I'm like, you guys, bunch of clowns. 4 years later, you're trying to intimidate people into, thinking that this is all official by threatening a misdemeanor for not showing up, and it's been repealed the whole time.
Are you kidding? And that's still on the tickets today.
4 years later, it's still on there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You want to talk about this? This is what just gets under my skin, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys. I mean, who was it that said, Randy Kelton says this, is that public servants are oftentimes the most egregious violators of the law.
Yes.
I mean, the law is cut and dry. It's black and white. It's like, this is what you can and cannot do. I'll give you a great example. This actually goes to one of the updates in the cases we're going to talk about. So this is a great segue. Real quick, before I get to that, let me just answer this question from CC. Yes, CC, the same would go for a ticket by mail. First of all, I'm sorry, whatever state you live in, I'm sorry. That's ridiculous to get a ticket in the mail for something you didn't even know. Yes, you would file a motion to dismiss. You would challenge the definition, and you would challenge the other side to bring forth the evidence that said that to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt that that's who you are. So,
well, in the Fifth Amendment, I mean, my gosh.
Oh, geez, yeah. So to go into what we're talking about here is we got an interesting update on oh crap, what was I just talking about? Dang it, I lost my train of thought. Help me out, Alina. Where was I before I answered her question?
Are you trying to move on to our cases or?
Yeah, you were talking. Gosh dang it! It was something that Kevin just brought up, and I'm like, oh, that's a great segue for
updates.
Yeah, it was the case updates, but gosh dang it, why I hate it when I lose my mind.
Yeah, it was before you answered Cece's question. You were.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's a great segue because I was going to go into a case update about Mike Brown with I remember because I was talking about how public servants are the most egregious violators of the law. Well, we filed suit, as you guys know. I've kept a lot of you up. A good friend of ours, Mike Brown, was at our state capitol earlier this year, attended a committee meeting on a hearing that a Senate committee was having about a vaccine passport bill. Long story short, number of people were displaying stickers on their shirts and other things that said vote yes for the bill. There's nothing in the legislative rules that prohibits that. However, there is a rule that prohibits signs and banners in the House gallery. Two different things, okay? The House gallery, which is where people can sit up at the top and they can watch the House of Representatives debate things. So anyway, long story short, this poor guy, he complies, but he starts asking questions, as is his right. The individuals who apparently had authority, or thought they did, took issue to that and told him to leave. And he says, no, I have a right to be here. They ended up arresting him and taking him out. So we filed suit. The moronic attorneys filed a motion to dismiss, and they in their motion to dismiss, they challenged that he was not arrested. Okay.
Wow.
Their challenge was he was not arrested. Okay. So let me just ask you two, what is your definition of arrested? If someone is arrested, what would you think they would be unable to do?
If you get manhandled, you're arrested.
Okay.
Your hands are behind your back in handcuffs.
Okay. And generally speaking, your freedom to move is limited at that point, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's what the Supreme Court has defined an arrest as being. Okay. So Utah law, this is what's interesting, is they have outlined for public safety and for law enforcement what they're supposed to do if they make an arrest without a warrant. Okay. The law states that person that it's arrested is to be taken to the nearest magistrate in the county, city, or municipality of where the offense occurred, or the next nearest magistrate. And what's supposed to happen is they're supposed to read an information, and according to the Utah Constitution, a determination of probable cause. Okay. Guess what never happens 99.9% of the time?
Wow.
That.
So that same law also states that if officers fail to do that, that they themselves are guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. So I pointed that out, right? So you have law enforcement officers who are supposed to know the law and are presumed to know the law, who are violating the law and have violated the sacred and inherent rights of one of Utah's citizens, and they're trying to get his case thrown out because he wasn't arrested. He wasn't in custody.
Well, then they assaulted him instead.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. It's fascinating. This is one of the things I love is like the Supreme Court has great stuff. Like, I threw it back in their face and said, hey, by the way, the Supreme Court says that someone independent of the prosecution and the arresting officers is required to make a determination of probable cause. So all throughout their motion to dismiss, all the officers had probable cause. Oh, they had probable cause. Says who? You?
Right.
So one of the things that we did is we filed an objection. And this is one of the things I want you guys to know, that you can do this. As pro se litigants, object every time those stupid liars open their mouths. They're going to file something back of, well, we don't know what this is, and affidavits aren't required, and I don't really care. I submitted everything, and I've supported everything under the pains and penalties of perjury. Why can't you put your money where your mouth is? Are you too afraid to do so? So let me see if I can find, let me open up that document. I want to show you guys what it looks like. Because, no, that's not it. Sorry, I know I've got it here somewhere. I'm just trying to remember. Oh gosh, actually, I think I know where it is. I want to show you this because it's an interesting document in that opposition. Oh, I want objection. I should have been a little more prepared on this. I'm sorry. Of course, now I can't find it when I want to find it. Anyway, the basis of it is that we object on the record to the attorney adding anything to the record that's not in an affidavit form. And then we also put at the end of that objection an affidavit that will work. And hey, Mr. Attorney, if everything is good to go, then why don't you just go ahead and sign this affidavit, get it notarized, and put it into the case? I mean, is there any problem with that you guys can see?
Why people aren't willing to follow the rules? It really makes you wonder.
Mm-hmm. See,
I always say laws are nice things.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's no teeth in them, if there's no consequence, if there's no honor in them, then we really don't have the foundation of the branches of government that we should have.
Exactly. Well, I mean, this is the interesting thing, and I apologize. I found the document, so let me just do it here. This is the thing that's fascinating is these guys attorneys they love to muddy the waters, and there's no consequence whatsoever. I mean, they can flat out lie in their documentation to the court, and there is absolutely no recourse whatsoever. So we object to that. So this is what we came up with, and I full disclosure, I didn't come up with this on my own. I was watching a YouTube video where this guy came up with this. I'm like, oh, this is great. So this is just a notice to the court of an objection, and it's a writ for affidavit of commercial liability. So then I come down here. I said, we're filing this writ for affidavit to notice this court that we are acting pro se. We object to counsels for defendants adding to the record anything that is not an affidavit form sworn to under the penalty of perjury with full commercial liability. We strongly suggest that the named defendants file counter affidavits rebutting the claims. To date, the only facts that have been submitted in the record have been proffered by the plaintiff, supported by affidavits under the penalties of perjury. And then I quoted Trinzi v. Pagliaro. That's a case we quote a lot. I said it's well settled law that attorney statements and arguments do not constitute facts or evidence before the court. And the district court recognizes this principle when it instructed the jury that statements and arguments of counsel are not evidence in the case. Right? So what do they have? What does the court have to rely upon if there's nothing that's been offered on the record under the pains and penalties of perjury by the defendants? Well, nothing. Technically, they have nothing. So I also talked about counsels for the defendants are either attorneys or witnesses, but they cannot be both. Okay. So here's what the affidavit looks like. Pretty simple. My full commercial liability, that I have firsthand knowledge of this case and everything stated is true, correct, certain, admissible as evidence, and not meant to be misleading. Okay. They're never going to sign this. And they didn't. They filed an opposition to it. They filed an opposition to it, and I'm not even going to bother to reply to the opposition because why? I don't need to waste my time with it. I don't care. So where we are with that case is we're waiting for a ruling on the motion to dismiss. What you guys need to know and understand is that as long as the complaint, when you read the complaint, and if you're just a third-party objective reader and you read the complaint and you're like, wow, these guys are in some trouble. Based on what's in the complaint, it's going to survive a motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim. That is the most common one they throw at you. It's a complete freaking waste of time. And they know it, and they're just driving their clients' dollars up because, again, these attorneys are greedy. All they care about is billable hours, and that's what they do. So that's where we stand with that case. Now let's update you guys on the case that Alina and I had working. We unfortunately are not in the best of a spot here, and a lot of it has to do with well, it's been frustrating to say the least. Wouldn't you say, Alina? Frustrating?
Oh yeah.
So as many of you know, I filed suit against the school district for the COVID restrictions, the mandates, the mask mandates, stuff like that. And I forgot, I shouldn't have said the C word, but whatever. And Alina and Mike filed one against another school district as well. The issue we had is that we named as defendants the school districts themselves and then each one of the board members. The problem you have is when you're moving a claim under the statute that we used, which is the Title 42, 1983, is you have to be specific with who did what to who when. And you have to be specific. So if we wanted to continue with this, we would have to name teachers, principals, other people who were directly involved with these restrictions against our kids. And that's just not a road that we wanted to go down. And I, correct me if I'm wrong, Alina, I don't believe that's a road you wanted to go down either, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We wanted accountability for the board members and for the school districts. The way the law is written and the way the process works, there just isn't a way to do that without someone else being held accountable. Now, we could go back and name a teacher or two or three as one of the defendants and seek damages of $10 if we wanted to. That's another little strategy we could do. But it's still a long shot given the fact that all of these restrictions have been terminated. There's a lot of it just gets really intricate and it's really difficult. So as many of you know, we filed our motion for leave for an amended complaint. The the defense filed their opposition to it. We're waiting for the ruling on the court. I'm just going to tell you right now, I will be shocked if the court grants our motion. Let me just put it that way. So I'm pretty sure that case is done with where it sits right now, which, it's frustrating. We wanted accountability. And, full disclosure to most of you, as you know, that was only the second lawsuit I've ever written. I wrote it a year and a half ago. Alina and I worked on it a year and a half ago. You learn so much over time. You learn what works, what doesn't work. So you live and learn, and we move on. So
well, and in reality, it's worth the effort because it's not like we had thousands or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to pay an attorney.
No,
more than anything, it was to set the precedent that you can't just blankly treat people with medical treatments. That's not the role of an educational institution.
No, it is not.
And that's what we were trying to prevent is anything further from coming down the line and doing that to our children. And even in the governorship lawsuit that we did, same thing. That was the intention.
And if you want to look at the positives, right? So what are the positives that came? I mean, we didn't get a ruling that's favorable in our case. We didn't win the case. We didn't get a settlement. So what are the positives? Well, the first thing I look at is we just charge them a buttload of money in attorney's fees.
Well, and in Davis
There's
County,
that.
I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but everybody who was up for re-election didn't run again.
Exactly. So
I think
both
it
of
made
the superintendents, right? Both of the superintendents retired or stepped down.
Well, Robison, yours did, mine did, but Robison, he took a position on the board.
Well, no, Robison was the president. He wasn't the superintendent. That was Newey. You're thinking of.
Oh yeah, I have him backwards. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Robison is now on the board.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought he was just kind of exiting the scene, but
No. Yeah. There was about so in the school district where I'm at here up north, there's 8 board members. 4 of them left, so we have 4 new board members, or actually maybe 5 or 6. It was almost a completely revamp, and same thing in the district where you are. And they're good people that have gotten in. People that are sick of this crap.
Well, maybe on your end, I don't know that we got there was not as favorable on our end, but
yeah,
it's okay. We got some wins, some whatever considered losses. Yeah.
Yep. So, so that's where that sits. Again, it's not, but you have to look at things objectively. As like, okay, what was our ultimate objective? And CC brings up a good question. Could you use a different title that would work? Possibly. I mean, you could go after them for violation of Title 15, 3, I want to say, which is the one where emergency use authorization, masks were only approved under that. You had to be given informed consent and the right to refuse. So you could say, you could go after that one, and I haven't heard of anybody doing that. It's been there's so many opinions on this whole C word thing that it's just getting increasingly difficult. So where I'm at right now with my situation is I want to pick the fights I know I can win. So Mike's case, Mike has 2 cases, and we're going to win both of them because we've put the record out there to show that they violated his constitutionally secured rights in both situations, both as a citizen and as a quote unquote defendant in a criminal prosecution. So the court record shows that. We challenged jurisdiction appropriately. They never did anything to prove it up. So we have the right and the authority to sue them in federal court, which is what we did. So there's a lot of interesting things that happened with that case. We're still waiting on a ruling on that one. But you guys, there's things we can do, right? So if you're in the federal court, like I like to be in, and you get, one of these rulings from a judge, or they do something that they're not supposed to do, it just takes one thing. And Randy Kelton is big at this. He says, yep, that'll do. File a judicial conduct complaint, because that gets sent up to the Court of Appeals and they hold hearings on it, especially if it's a magistrate judge who's trying to become a full-time district court judge. If they get 1 or 2 of those judicial conduct complaints, good luck. They'll never, ever be approved as a district judge. And then likewise, district judges, if they get those filed against them, it's going to be a pretty big deal for them too. So that's where we stand on those. Alina, anything else you want to add before we wrap things up? I went a little longer than I wanted to, but I just wanted to, and CC, thank you so much. Said hold your heads high. You're proud of you. I appreciate that. I really do. And I do have to apologize. I get a lot of people asking on Telegram, people emailing me, sending me all of their information about their cases, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it. And it's just so difficult for me to do that. So please know I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm not ignoring you on purpose. It's these cases are so intricate and so detailed. I need to be able to wrap my head around them if I'm going to be able to help you. And like I said before, is I'm here to teach you how to fish so you can survive on your own. I'm not here to give you a fish, using the analogy from the Bible. So, Alina, anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
Well, I would just say, just be prepared for the opposition that comes. When I ran for office, that was the one thing they really wanted to use against me, was that I had done these. And I had kind of a confrontation with my current rep who stepped down because he was part of the smear campaign.
Yes, he
And,
was.
I just said, basically, how dare you? Like, you go after me for doing a lawsuit when you're an attorney and you make a living off of doing a lawsuit. The hypocrisy is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you have to expect that when you're trying to do good things, you're going to get that opposition, and you need to know. You need to know what that looks like. You need to be willing to go to the end of the line and be very confident in the decisions you're making. So
Yep.
It's been a good journey.
I bet. Kevin, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
Sure. I just posted this to the Telegram's page, but there's a great, one man summed up his opinion of the judges in courts by saying, look up extortion in your Black's Law Dictionary and you'll see justice courts. It's an article just going through the justice courts, and the problems that are systemic and constitutional. Most people just aren't aware, and part of this is just education, educating ourselves. Myself, it's been a long process, and a lot of people don't want to believe that they're that bad. And here's a great resource that's 45 pages that goes into it in detail. So
Awesome.
threw that out there for people.
Thanks for throwing that out there. Real quick, Chris was asking a question: is there a timeline for filing a complaint against a judge? Not that I know of, Chris. Check your local court's rules. And I can tell you that if you're in federal court, those rules are going to be under the appellate court. So go to your court of appeals. There'll be a page there that'll say, judicial conduct complaint. It'll talk to you about what the process is, what the rules are for that. But as far as I know, I don't believe there is a timeline or a statute of limitations. So great question there. C2AZ, thank you so much. We just appreciate you guys being here, for supporting us. Thank you again, everyone. And we will just let you guys know on some future broadcasts. I'm going to be speaking and talking some more with Brandon, the Big Sib. You guys know Brandon, the Big Sib. Alphonse will be on with me. I'm in the works to get Dr. Graves on. So we're going to have some good discussions coming up about things you guys can do to prepare yourselves. Just do like what like what Kevin did. Just take the bull by the horns and just get into it. And once you do, you guys are going to see your life will change immensely. So with that, you guys, thank you. Alina, Sonar, thanks for being here. Everybody else, thanks for being here. Until then, signing off. Till next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, James.